Since its very founding, the defining frameworks of our country, democracy guiding our politics and capitalism our economy, have been in tension. And in no single area has this conflict been more clear than our media. Responsible, on the one hand, for informing, agitating, entertaining, and inspiring us, American media have also become tools by which merchandise is sold, data is collected, and money is made. Are these two goals mutually exclusive, or can we effectively regulate them so both can be served? Helping me navigate these questions today is Victor Pickard, assistant professor at the Annenberg School for Communication at the University of Pennsylvania. He is also most recently the author of America's Battle for Media Democracy, The Triumph of Corporate Libertarianism and the Future of Media Reform. Welcome, Professor Pickard.
Thank you for having me on the show, Peter.
Absolutely, a pleasure. Let's say, in your book, you contend that the 1940s, from a media perspective, happen to look a lot like the 2010s. So let's go back almost 80 years ago and listen in to the father of radio, Lee DeForest, as he addresses the National Association of Broadcasters, and quote, "What have you gentlemen done with my child? He was conceived as a potent instrumentality for culture, fine music, the uplifting of America's mass intelligence. You have debased this child, made him a laughingstock. The occasional fine program is periodically smeared with impudent insistence to buy or try. Soap opera without end or sense floods each household daily." So I guess if that's the circumstance of the day, what was going on that elicited such a damning comment from someone so passionate about the medium of radio and hopeful for its potential?
I think Lee DeForest was capturing a general anguish about how people were feeling towards this still new medium, this potentially democratizing medium, radio. Mm-hmm. And many people felt it wasn't living up to its democratic promise. It wasn't fulfilling this potential. Many of the things you hear today about the internet, that this medium is going to revolutionize the way we govern ourselves, the way we talk about important social issues. Many people were saying this about radio in the 1930s and 40s, but by the mid-40s, when Lee DeForest made this damning statement, people had sensed that something had gone wrong with radio. It had become overly commercialized. It was being dominated by a handful of corporate monopolies. And I think that this is what you sense from this kind of quote, that he was so upset about what had happened to his baby, as he said. And you see this media reform movement emerge in the 1940s.
Okay, so then we what are the media challenges that we face today that maybe parallel those of the 1940s, if we're connecting the 40s to our own era?
So similar to what was happening in the 1940s, again, what we're hearing about today, this domination of media monopolies over our core communication infrastructure. So in the 1940s, we're mostly talking about CBS, NBC. There was a smaller network called Mutual Broadcasting System, MBS. But generally, we're talking about a duopoly. And many people were trying to organize around these media reform issues. You had people who were very upset about the nonstop advertising on the air. They used terms of derision, like they called them plug uglies and singing jingles. They were very concerned about what was happening to their programming, nonstop soap operas during the day. So I think a number of these indictments against commercial radio were crystallizing into a full-fledged media reform movement in the 1940s.
Certainly the notion of net neutrality is something that viewers have likely heard of. They know it has something to do with internet access, and they have a sense that it's something important to us. But what beyond that is net neutrality? What are we speaking of exactly when we speak about net neutrality? And what's on the line with the FCC ruling due out later this month around the issue?
it's really just speaking to a very basic democratic safeguard, which is the idea that all content on the internet should be treated equally. That your internet service provider, say Comcast or Verizon, should not be able to slow down or block particular websites, particular kinds of content. And it's something that we generally took for granted for many years. But now, if we were to lose net neutrality, it would fundamentally change the nature of the internet, it would change the way that we interact with the internet on a daily basis. So the stakes could not be higher, and that's why there has been all this attention, all this buzz about this decision that's coming down on February 26th at the FCC.
Now, today we have net neutrality, which is certainly a mobilizing moment, and similar to the moment that was reached in the mid-40s. We see average citizens writing on the issue, activist organizations such as Free Press, Center for Digital Democracy, ACLU, who are taking certainly a very strong position for greater media access and equality. What seems to be lacking is an advocate at the federal level. Certainly in the book you introduce us to Clifford Durr, to Lawrence Fly at the FCC, who really helped turn that ship in a different direction. Tell us about today's FCC and its apparent mission and vision of our media.
That's an excellent question, and many people have been sort of scratching their heads trying to figure out what is the direction of the FCC, what will they do? Especially, there's been a lot of speculation around Tom Wheeler, who, as many of your viewers know, I'm sure, is a former lobbyist for the cable and cellular industries. So there's always been some concern that Tom Wheeler would not have the political will or the instincts to actually challenge some of these entrenched commercial interests. But we might be pleasantly surprised by what he does, although at this point it's not even a surprise, because we know that at the very least he's going to push for pretty strong net neutrality protections. He wrote an op-ed recently describing his position, although many of the details are yet to be revealed. So I think that what this actually shows is that even mainstream, industry-friendly FCC commissioners can be pushed by social pressures, by public interest, and I think that's a very good thing to see.
Let's take a look outside of our own country, because most other advanced democracies deal with the challenge of building a responsive media by removing much of the profit-making motive. Think the UK's BBC and the CBC to the north. While critics of state-regulated and subsidized media worry that it would become state-controlled media, what does the research actually show about when governments help subsidize the media for a country?
So the research actually shows what might seem counterintuitive for a lot of Americans. A lot of Americans, when they hear media subsidy, those two words in the same sentence, they fall into a fetal position. It runs against a lot of our assumptions about the proper relationship between government and media. But in many countries, as you know, this is not a controversial idea. Many media systems are publicly subsidized. The BBC's always trotted out, but most leading democracies have very strong public media systems. And what the research is showing is that, and I'll just put the caveat out there that sometimes it's hard to show causation versus correlation. Sure. But at the very least, they're finding that publicly subsidized media institutions do not tend to be more subservient to those in power. If anything, they tend to be more autonomous, more independent, even more adversarial to those in power compared to privately owned, say, commercial newspapers in the United States. So publicly subsidized media actually can provide more critical coverage. They're also showing that the publics in these countries tend to be better informed and better engaged around particular issues compared to the publics of highly commercial systems. So it's no longer just speculation or polemic. It's now we actually have empirical evidence to at least suggest that these countries aren't sliding towards totalitarianism.
What organizations today do you think are articulating an alternative vision for our media that you would support and that are organizing to try and make that vision a reality and that viewers might want to check out?
Absolutely. So one group that I think you may have mentioned in passing, in full disclosure, I used to work for them. Free Press is one of the leading, probably the leading media reform organization in the United States. In terms of sustained engagement around these issues. They've been working on net neutrality and internet policies for over a decade. They've been fighting media concentration. Beyond Free Press, you've got Common Cause. The former FCC Commissioner Michael Copps has been very active with Common Cause and has been out there on these issues. Public Knowledge is another organization that's been very devoted to media reform issues. And then I will note that there's a lot of local media justice organizations out there. One that I'll mention that's very active here in Philadelphia, the Media Mobilizing Project, MMP. They've been very active in opposing Comcast on a number of local policy issues, and I think they're doing fantastic work. So those are just a few. But of course, average citizens and media users, consumers, I think they're the ones that have to be really active on these issues. I would point to the people who are writing to the FCC, writing to their members of Congress. That is essential activism.
Anything else you feel would be important for viewers to know, either about the contemporary media scene, Victor, and maybe means to democratize it, or other ways that your research of the 1940s can sort of inform our understanding of the media landscape today?
Yes, well, I think one lesson that emerges from my research of the 1940s is that a couple of things. First of all, we ignore media policy at our own peril. So it's almost a cliche among activists, but whatever your first issue is, whatever your main political concern is, your second issue really should be about changing the media system. It should be about some form of media activism, because without a democratized media system, you will not get very far advancing your personal political project. The second lesson that emerges from this research is that we need to focus on structural alternatives. We need to maintain a structural critique to the media system. And what I mean by that is that we can't simply expect to shame commercial media monopolies into being good. We need to actually have strong regulatory actions that keep them in line, but we also need to create our own public alternatives. We need structural alternatives to the commercial media system, and this would range from a expanded public media system, for example, a reinvented public broadcast system, but it also would entail creating what's known as municipal broadband internet networks. And I think this is another point that President Obama has come out on and the FCC seems to be supporting, but we need to have an alternative to the internet service monopolies and duopolies that dominate so much of our internet today.
Sure. Well, I can't thank you enough, Victor, for taking the time to speak with me today. Also, certainly for doing the research that it took to write America's Battle for Media Democracy, and to thank you for introducing us to the individuals, the organizations, and a movement that we might tether our hopes to as we deal with media challenges of today.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Peter. I've really enjoyed it.
You bet. Those who forget the past are bound to repeat it, said Santayana. In the case of our media, the lessons are there for the taking, and we need not repeat the mistakes of, for example, the 1940s. What seems to be lacking today, however, is a clear consensus regarding which domain must take priority. our politics, or our economy. But let's be clear. Democracy made subservient to the market will, before long, become oligarchy, the rule of the wealthy. We need only look around us to see plentiful evidence of this truth. So let's get it right this time. Support organizations you believe champion the country you want to live in. Encourage the 5 FCC commissioners to take a stand. You can find their emails at fcc.gov. And believe that your voice can be heard. For Professor Victor Pickard, I'm Peter Bermudez for Arlington Public News.